He was 23, undefeated, 16 wins, 13 knockouts, 0 losses. Boxing insiders were calling him one of the most promising prospects in his division. He never threw another punch again. On August 13, 2026, 11 years after the worst night of his life, Prichard Colón finally stopped fighting, not in the ring, in a hospital bed. But here's the part that will stay with you. The fight that ended his career only lasted 9 rounds. The fight for his life lasted 11 years. Stick around, because what happened to this kid in Virginia changed the way boxing deals with one of its most dangerous fouls. And his family's fight for him is one of the most powerful stories of love you'll ever hear. Prichard Colón was born in Florida in 1992. At 14, he left for Puerto Rico, his parents' homeland, to chase boxing. Here are the numbers: 5 national amateur titles, a youth Pan American gold medal, all before he turned pro in 2013. Then, 10 straight knockout wins to open his professional career. By October 2015, his record stood at 16 wins, 0 losses, 13 by knockout. You don't need us to tell you he was special. The record speaks for itself. On October 17, 2015, in Fairfax, Virginia, he stepped into the ring against another undefeated fighter, Terrell Williams. He had no idea it would be his last fight, ever. Something was wrong from the opening rounds. Colón complained about being hit behind the head, not the face, not the chin, the back of the head, over and over. In boxing, that's not just dangerous, it's illegal. They call it a rabbit punch. The referee deducted 1 point from Williams for it. Once. Other disputed blows went unpenalized. What role that played is still debated. A state investigation later found no single action so clear-cut that responsibility could be pinned on one person. Here's the moment that haunts this story. In the 7th round, after a knockdown, Colón told the ringside doctor his head was pounding. He was dizzy. The doctor cleared him to continue. By the 9th round, Williams knocked him down twice more. Colón looked disoriented, barely able to defend himself. When the round ended, his own corner made a heartbreaking mistake. They believed the fight was over and pulled his gloves off. Under the rules, a boxer can't re-enter the ring without gloves on. They couldn't get them back on in time. The result: Colón was disqualified. The first and only loss of his career, not because he was outfought, but because of a mix-up in the chaos of the moment. No one in that arena knew what was about to happen. Colón left the ring on his own feet. That's the last time he ever would, unaided, for a very long time. Backstage, it got worse fast. Dizziness, nausea, vomiting. Then, he collapsed. At the hospital, doctors found the truth no one wanted to hear. Severe bleeding in his brain. Emergency surgery. Immediately. He survived the surgery, but he didn't wake up. Not for 221 days. 7 months. While the world moved on, while other fighters had their next fight, their next paycheck, their next headline, Prichard Colón's parents sat by a hospital bed, waiting for their son to open his eyes. When he finally did wake up, he had to relearn nearly everything. His career was over at 17 professional fights. His injuries were permanent and severe, but his family's fight? That was just beginning. His mother, Nieves Melendez, took on the role of his primary caregiver. His father, Richard, his former trainer, stayed by his side too, through therapy, appointments, and years of slow, hard-won progress. Not for a few months, not for a year, for more than a decade. Think about that. Every single day for over 10 years, showing up for someone who needed constant care. No cameras, no crowd, no knockouts to celebrate. Just presence, on repeat, for 3,650+ days. In 2017, his parents filed a lawsuit, more than $50 million, against the ringside physician, Dr. Richard Ashby, and the fight's promoters. The suit alleged the doctor should have stopped the fight in the 7th round, after Colón reported dizziness and pain in the back of his head. Terrell Williams was never named as a defendant. A state investigation into the fight had already concluded that no single action was clear-cut enough to place responsibility on one person, which is part of why the family's questions were never fully answered, and why this case became such a flashpoint for the entire sport. The WBC responded. It introduced tougher guidance on rabbit punches, zero tolerance, immediate warnings, and stronger referee intervention, a policy that became known as the Prichard Colón rule. And in 2021, something happened that brought this whole story full circle. The WBC named him an honorary champion. Think about that phrase for a second. He never got his hand raised for a world title. He never heard the words, "and the new champion of the world." That dream was taken from him in 9 rounds, in Virginia, in 2015. But 6 years later, the WBC gave him a belt anyway, not one he won in the ring. It wasn't the world title he'd dreamed of as a fighter, but it was a recognition of everything he'd endured outside the ring, for years, without ever quitting. On August 13, 2026, Prichard Colón passed away. He was 33 years old. A cause of death has not been made public. Nearly 11 years after the punches that changed everything, 11 years his family spent by his side. His father, Richard, announced the news himself. In a simple, quiet message, he thanked everyone for their years of love and prayers, and said his son was now somewhere better. Prichard Colón's professional record will always say 16 wins, 1 loss. But that one loss was never the story of his life. His real fight began after the final bell, and he fought it for 11 more years than anyone in that arena could have imagined, surrounded by a family that never once let go. He lost his last fight. That was never what defined him. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit subscribe, because there are more stories like this one waiting to be told. Stories about people who never made the headlines for winning, but who won anyway, every single day.